All right, welcome back for another one of the node by node challenges. So if you haven't been paying attention to my other videos, I'm going through every single node in Blender's shader editor and trying to explain how they work. And I'm taking information from all different sources, from YouTube and from TikTok and from a lot of different professionals and people who are much smarter than I am and know a lot of information. But this is going to be really helpful, hopefully, as you go through, because I'm trying to compile the information in one place. So you can come here for any one of the nodes that's in the shader and get a basic understanding of how to use it. Now, there's a lot of different ways you can use all these different nodes, especially when you use them in combinations with others. I'm just going to show you one way so you have a basic understanding of how they work and what they are. So we've been through a bunch. Today, we're going to be talking about another input node called camera data. Now, camera data in itself, if you look at it, you're like, what use is that going to be to me? It seems kind of silly. It actually has a lot of uses. So the first one I'm going to talk about, so I've got a regular principled BSDF shader on here. You can ignore the emission shader for this first one we're going to talk about. But you'll see I just have a Voronoi texture up on here so that I can show you how this works. So if you look at this, you're going to see that it has a pattern on here based on color from the Voronoi texture into the base color. That's why it has all these checkered spots. And obviously, if you move these around, it's going to change the size and everything on it, which is just part of the Voronoi texture, which we're not talking about right at the moment. But I'm just using that to show how this works. So if we take and we do plug in into this Voronoi texture the view vector of the camera data, you're going to all of a sudden see that now it's going to change the pattern of it. And when you change your view, the pattern does not change. You're always seeing the same thing. So if you want to make it to where the image texture does not change based on your viewpoint and how you're looking at it, you want it to always look the same. You can use this view vector to be able to maintain that. So when you're in the camera, it's always going to look the same no matter where you go. So there can be some practical uses to that. Okay, so that's the view vector. Now, the other two, Z depth and view distance, are a little bit different. So they're going to be based on your distance from the camera to your object and what you're looking at. So first one we're going to look at is Z depth. So this one I plugged in an emission shader because it helps show it a little bit better, but you can do it with anything. It doesn't have to be an emission shader. But let's say you have an effect that you want to apply to a certain area and not everything. Okay, what you can do is you can use this camera data node. And what that's going to do is I've got two shaders, the regular and an emission, mixed into a mix shader into the material output. Voronoi doesn't really matter for this. And then I plugged in a color ramp just to be able to control how it moves. It's very useful when you're using these camera data nodes to be able to use a color ramp. And then I just did divide a math node in here, which we'll get into the math nodes and what they're for, but I used a math node in here so I could really just ramp up the strength of this. And you'll see why here in a second. Okay, so we're going to take this camera node, camera data node. We're going to plug in the Z depth into the value. And the first thing you're going to notice is this pink hue. Now, that pink hue is coming from our emission shader because normally without it, if we took away that node and we just left it without, what it's going to do is it's going to give you a combination of the two shaders down here. So we'll just take a mix of these two together. By taking and adding in this color ramp, what you're doing is you're ramping up how much it's going to be using the texture, whether you go fully to pink or whether you have the mixed colors on here. And then by taking and adding in this Z depth here from the camera data, it's going to give you almost like a gradient effect. Okay, so it's going to allow it to kind of gradually move across. Now, the reason it's up divided by 40 is because if you have it lower, the lower the strength, the more it's going to fill it up. The higher the strength, the less it's going to fill up. Okay? So no matter what you do, it's going to be set like that. Now, when you go in the viewport and you start moving around, you're going to notice it changes where that is. So if all of a sudden you want it to be the farther away part of the camera is what is affected by it, no matter where you move the camera, the closer part of the camera doesn't have that effect. The farther part away from the camera does. So that's really important. Okay. Same thing with as you move through it's going to adjust the distance of it. Okay. Now view distance works very similar. View distance is going to be also your distance to the camera. See how it's adjusting it. It has a slight variation to how it's adjusting the look of it compared to the Z depth, but it's going to have the same basic counterpart to it, to where wherever you move, it's going to be the farther part of the way of the camera. And what the color ramp is going to do for you is it's going to allow you to control how much of that effect is on here. The closer you have them together, it's going to be a little bit stronger, but it's going to be farther away, whereas, as you move through here, it's a little bit different, and you can flip them if you want to. By flipping it, you're just going to have the gradient start on the other side, right? Closer to you instead of farther away. So you get to control whether you want the gradient to be all the way in the back, and mostly the regular with just a little bit of the pink hue with the emission, or kind of build it up into where it fills up the whole object. And like I said, you can switch it. Okay, you also can change this over if you wanted to do constant. Constant's going to give it a hard finish on the edge. Okay, so you're going to have it to where it's not a gradient, it's more of just like a hard edge across it. So that could work well, like maybe even if you're doing like a eclipse or something like that, solar eclipse, and you're trying to make it look like that, that might be a cool way to do that. So hopefully that gives you some insight into camera data. Like I said, Z depth and view distance are pretty similar. View vector is a little bit different because of how the structure of it is, but it gives you a pretty good idea as a whole. And but all these can be used to just kind of add some additional detail and control where that detail is in your scene. So hopefully this helps. Make sure you follow me. Make sure you like my video, share it, and make sure that you follow and watch for the next ones. Thanks.